Here we go. Boom. Okay. So what we want to do, we want to have text moving in a specific way. Then you want to use text animators because you can tell it how you want it to move. You can have letters move individually. So I'm going to open a new file. And there's nothing in it yet. And I want to make sure that I have my folder set up. So I'm going to get the folder set up here. I'm going to call my folders my last name and my first initial. Let's see. And project 3, which you can't see because it's not something that is showing, but it's there. Just want to make sure I have it. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this into the folder so I can find it. Let's go back to desktop. And here we go. I'm going to save it into my project folder. And I'm going to make sure I have the correct title. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open a new composition and make sure it's the correct size. Yes, it is here. HDV, HDTV, 720, 29.97. I'm going to call this 03 tutorials. And the duration, I want this to be just 5 seconds. Let's get this to fit. Okay, so when you have text in After Effects, there's not only the text preset animators, you can make your own text animators. And the first way, the first thing you have to do is to actually make animators for some text. And then you can go ahead and save that as a preset if you want to. But first, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a line of text. So in order to make sure that this is going to be easy to work with, I'm going to use the text workspace, and I'm going to go ahead and reset the text to saved layout. So there's nothing unusual about it. So I can start with just everything being what I want. Now I'm going to get my text tool. I am going to double click the text tool so it will put an insertion point right in the middle. First I have to make sure the comp selector won't do it. There we go. So there's my insertion point. And I want to make sure that I've got Helvetica New. And let's go for regular, which is here, we'll call it regular. And we want it to be 90 pixels. Make sure the paragraph is centered, and then I'm going to, I have to double click on the empty text layer because I entered it before I had set everything. And now I want to type text animators. Okay. Now I'm going to select this layer, and I am going to press return to make sure that it has corner handles and it's not highlighted. And then come in here and you'll see there's a little triangle to the side. So you can fly that down, and you see next to, instead of just having transform, you've got text with a little triangle. click down on that, and you can see across from text it says animate. So what you want to do, well, before we do that, let's go ahead and if you hold down Option and Shift and click on the transform, it disappears. It's still really there. It's just not cluttering up your space. It's just telling it, we don't need to look at this right now. So you can do that whenever you have too many things that you're looking at and you don't want to have all these different options. You can just make it disappear, hiding it basically. Now click on the triangle to the right of animate to reveal the available properties that you can animate. You can enable per character 3D. You can animate the anchor point. You can actually make the place where everything rotates change across time. You can animate the position. You can animate the scale. You can animate skew. You can animate rotation. You can animate opacity. You can change the fill color, the stroke color, the width. You can change the tracking, the line anchor, the line spacing, the character offset, the character value, which means you can make it go through all the different letters and symbols if you want. And then you can put a blur on it. So there's a lot of things you can do with animators. So first we're going to do just one animator. So let's click on position so we can set a position animator. So now what we need to do is we need to tell it what range and how to change things. So position is what's going to be changed. It looks sort of like the position under transform, except it's telling you how much it has changed from the initial value. So these numbers are 0, 0. It's right in the middle. So it should be 640, 360 like everything else if it was telling you where it is. It's not. It's telling you where it is in relation to where it started. So I'm going to click down on range selector. You can animate the start. You can animate the end. And you can animate the offset. But right now we're going to animate the start. So what we want to do is let's keyframe start, okay? Because we're going to use start to control what's happening. And now we're going to move the position. We're not keyframing it, we're moving it. So let's set the Y value, the second value for position, to 300. And suddenly it's down near the bottom. If you drag the value to make it longer or bigger, it goes further off. If you drag it to go back smaller, it goes further up. So you see how that relates, because the value for Y starts at the top. So any change that you make is going to be, if it's a positive number, it's going to go lower. And if it's a negative number, it will go higher. So that's how the Y position coordinate works. Now, if you drag the value for start, you'll see that this is how it actually makes the changes. And it makes the changes one letter at a time. So when we get up to 100%, it's back where it started. At 0, it's at the bottom. But in the middle, it's half up and half down. So this is how you work with your animators. So the range selector controls what amount of change has happened, but the actual type of animation, of animate property, you tell it how much you want it to change from the beginning. Okay, so when we have the position value set for 0 at the start and end at 100, and we've keyframed start, we want to select the stopwatch for start, go to the frame 215, okay? So we've got it keyframed at 0 at the beginning, and then at 215, we want to change the end value to 100%, or the start value to 100%. Okay, so now, go back to beginning, and we press the space bar to preview it, and you can see we've got each letter moving one at a time. So now I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to go up to 3 seconds. Okay. Now, if you want to set a keyframe that has the same value as the previous keyframe, you just go between the 2 triangles at the left and you turn that little diamond shape into a filled diamond shape. And now there is a keyframe right there. And now if we go back to 5 seconds, or 4:29, and now we can make start go back to 0. So now it goes all the way up and comes all the way down. And I'm going to stop that and I'm going to save it. Now, the nice thing about text animators, one of the really interesting things is you can just use these 3 keyframes in this one animator. You can add properties to the animator and make all different kinds of motion happen at the same time. So to this animator, I'm going to add the property of scale. And the scale I'm going to change to 25%. And since it's linked, it goes both for X and Y. And you can see now it is incredibly small, but let's see. Oh, it just added another animator. Does that sometimes. So now I want to add an animator, property of scale. You have to make sure you go to the right triangle. I took the wrong one. I want to go to add. So just to the right of animate 1, you want to go to add, and you want to change the scale to 25%. Okay, so now it's going to start at 25%, and it's going to move up, and then it moves back down. Now, to this animator 1 again, I'm going to add a property of skew. And I'm going to skew it. For the skew value, I'm going to put in 20. I'm not going to skew the axis. I'm just going to skew the skew value. So now it's tilted. But it stands up as it goes up. Now I'm going to choose an additional property of opacity, and I'm going to set the opacity to 25%. And now you can see that it's grayed out, but it gets completely white as it goes through to 100%. Okay. Now I'm going to add the property of rotation. And I'm going to change the rotation to 30 degrees. So now, when we press the space bar, you can see that it gets bigger, it straightens up, it rotates, and it becomes completely opaque. And that's all done with 4 keyframes. I'm going to Command S to save that. Now, in order to output it, as long as you have the Creative Cloud, you should have the Adobe Media Encoder. So let's add to the Adobe Media Encoder queue. And since they just sent an update last week, I had to run it twice this morning. The first time it failed to encode, so it did it twice. And the second time it did encode. So if you have problems with it encoding the first time, try it a second time and see if it works. If it doesn't work, then you have to make sure that something is fixed. But up until then, you know, always just assume that it's going to be okay if you try it twice, because it probably will be. If it's not, then you'll have to do something about it.